This chart compares the prevalence of psychopathy in the general public, roughly 1%, against the boardroom, where the figure climbs to 12% among CEOs. The dark triad, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, represents an ancient biological toolkit used to navigate social hierarchies and secure resources through competition. Biologists model this through the hawk-dove game, a mathematical framework showing how individuals choose between aggressive and submissive strategies. When resources are scarce, the ability to use aggression and manipulation to negotiate power becomes a stable, if high-risk, strategy for survival. This creates two distinct archetypes of the same predatory drive: the failed psychopath, who ends up in a prison cell, and the successful psychopath, who reaches the corner office. While both share the same instincts, a specific internal mechanism determines whether that drive leads to leadership or a life of incarceration. Human aggression begins in the brain's primitive threat circuit. The amygdala acts as a rapid sensor, processing stimuli and triggering the hypothalamus to initiate a physical fight-or-flight response. In the failed psychopath's brain, a hyper-reactive amygdala overpowers a weak prefrontal cortex, resulting in unplanned violence. The successful psychopath has the opposite profile. Their amygdala is hypoactive and numb to fear, while their prefrontal cortex is highly functional and illuminated with steady activity. This intact PFC allows them to simulate the emotional reactions of others and plan cold, instrumental aggression. They can navigate high-stakes environments without the interference of fear. The presence of cognitive brakes, not the absence of predatory intent, is the hardware difference that keeps a successful manipulator out of prison. This neural hardware is fueled by a specific chemical environment known as the dual hormone hypothesis. This matrix shows how testosterone and cortisol interact to shape behavior. High testosterone drives the desire for status, but it only produces fearless dominance when paired with low levels of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. These individuals are often driven by a hyper-responsive dopamine system in the brain's reward center. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that facilitates the anticipation of pleasure and reward, making the act of winning a negotiation or exploiting a rival a potent neurochemical high. They maintain social influence through a mechanism called dark empathy, which is rooted in the mirror neuron system. Mirror neurons are brain cells that activate both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else doing it, allowing us to understand their intent. There are two types of empathy. Cognitive empathy maps another person's thoughts and vulnerabilities. Affective empathy is the ability to actually feel their pain. In a manipulator, the cognitive network is highly active, while the affective network remains completely dark. This allows them to intellectually identify your emotional weaknesses without ever feeling the guilt associated with exploiting them. This biological architecture starts with the MAOA gene, which produces an enzyme that breaks down neurotransmitters like serotonin. Certain low-activity variants of this gene are associated with a higher risk for aggressive behavior. Genetics alone are not a guarantee. These traits typically only activate when paired with environmental triggers, like childhood trauma, abusive parenting, or toxic peer socialization. This process is driven by epigenetics, specifically DNA methylation, where chemical tags attach to the DNA to change how genes are expressed. Early trauma creates permanent biological marks that alter how the brain regulates stress and aggression for life. These biological changes solidify into maladaptive early schemas, deeply held beliefs that the world is a dangerous place, where manipulation is the only viable path to security. The successful predator is manufactured when a genetic vulnerability meets a hostile early environment. Modern corporate hierarchies are often built in a way that inadvertently rewards these specific traits, promoting manipulators to the highest levels of leadership. Because their amygdala is effectively numb to fear, these leaders can execute mass layoffs or high-risk financial gambles without hesitation. Shareholders often mistake this lack of emotional friction for visionary courage. Over time, this leadership style creates a culture of fear and high turnover. Driven by short-term dopamine hits and lacking affective empathy, these individuals often lead their organizations toward ethical or financial collapse. Protecting social and corporate structures requires a shift in how we evaluate leadership,
moving away from the charm of fearless dominance and toward objective tests for emotional integrity. Human manipulation is a measurable biological phenomenon. Mapping its neural circuitry allows us to stop rewarding predatory behavior and build organizations that actually endure.